I have spent the past year of my life working on this motorcycle, but even after all this time, I haven't ridden it, not even once. Though to be fair, it had neglectful previous owners and sat for 17 years, so the process of getting it roadworthy hasn't exactly been easy. I've had to deal with slight engine damage, I had to replace the entire ignition system and completely rebuild and repair the carburetors just to get it to fire up. Getting it so it can move has been a whole other can of worms. I completely rebuilt the braking system, clutch system, completely overhauled the front suspension, and not to mention did all the work that went into rescuing the gas tank made of Swiss cheese. Bottom line is that I have spent so much money and so much time on this thing. I need to ride it. So in this episode, I'm gonna try and make that happen. The last episode ended with the bike in pieces. I did a bunch of little jobs here and there, like fixing a fuel leak, solving some electrical issues, 3D printing some missing parts, installing new brake lines, a new chain, and doing a valve adjustment. But what stopped me in my tracks was dropping the oil pan to remove some broken chunks of chain tensioner. Everything came apart perfectly fine, but if you remember, I didn't get a chance to reinstall everything because the replacement gasket I bought was a cheap one from eBay and consequently the wrong size. None of the bolt holes lined up. So I ordered a proper OEM one and was left waiting for that to arrive. Except I just realized that I don't exactly have to wait for it to arrive. I don't know when it's going to get here, but I do know that when it does, me in the future is going to send it to me in the past to compare it against the original cheap gasket that I bought. So I can just also go to that point in time and take it for myself. Cool. Let's get this thing on the bike. You know, now that I think about it, if me right now didn't go back in time and take it, me earlier would have just been left with it and I wouldn't have had to wait to get it. I was wondering why future me didn't just leave it for past me to have. Turns out he did, but present me is an idiot and didn't realize that. And speaking of present me being an idiot, I think he just installed that oil pan with the O-ring missing. So time to undo everything I just did. But if I'm being fully transparent, and I think I am, here's a picture of me, it wasn't at this point I realized I forgot to install the O-ring, but it was after I got the exhaust, radiator, oil cooler, and everything else back on the bike. Basically right when it was ready to start up, I saw the O-ring sitting on the workbench, which was very humbling. But for the sake of video flow, I'm showing it now. So let's just pretend that it was at this point that I remembered it. Or better yet, let's pretend I didn't forget at all. Back in part 7 of this series, Consolidated Motor Spares, or CMS, sent me a box of goodies, mostly gas tank stuff, but also a set of brand new crush gaskets for the exhaust pipes. These are for where the pipes connect to the cylinder head. These little copper rings get squished, making a really good seal, and they also get stuck in place, as you can see by me having to pry them out. But when they're new, they love to fall right off. So before they go in place, I'm going to dab on a little bit of high temp copper RTV. That way they'll stick right in there until the actual exhaust pipes go on and squish them down. Now, I will say that you can get away with just keeping the old ones in there and reusing them. I know I definitely have on multiple occasions, but it's generally best practice to go ahead and replace them. They're cheap enough, and if you've already got the exhaust pipes off for another job, it only adds an extra minute, if even that. Even though these next parts will never really be seen, like, at all, I wasn't a fan of how the exhaust clamps were looking, rusty cast iron and all. So I blasted them clean, gave them a few coats of high heat black paint, and baked them in the oven. Baking them should help the paint be more durable, but more importantly to me, makes them fully dry and ready to handle in minutes as opposed to hours. Fresh paint usually loves to get scraped off if you're tightening down a nut or bolt onto the surface, but these are ready to be fully bolted down now. However, I'm not going to do that just yet. When I've run the engine in the past, I installed the muffler just by slipping it over the pipe and letting it hang there. And that's because I haven't actually been able to install it properly. Don't forget that this Yoshimura unit is a piece of crap. Getting the muffler's mounting tab to align to where it's supposed to bolt up to has been damn near impossible. But since the exhaust manifold isn't fully bolted down now, there's plenty of wiggle room to get everything where it needs to be. But I just remembered it's gonna have to come back off when I go to do oil changes in the future because it blocks the filter. And that means I'll be going back to struggling to get it back on. Yay. But with all these torqued to spec now, it's time for the cooling systems to go back on, both oil and water. Well, need more coolant and also probably more oil. So I'm probably gonna go get more coolant and oil. So, with air bubbles burped out of the system and fresh oil added to the engine, the bike can be fired up for the first time after sitting in pieces for a month. There's still a little bit of fuel left in the carburetor bowls, so it should run for at least a little bit. But let's find out. What the heck? There's oil pouring out of the oil cooler lines. God damn it. Okay. There's a crack in one of those lines. They're both very wet. Shit. The bike was gonna be done today! Oh. What the hell? There's no leaks anywhere else though, so that's fantastic. Yeah, I don't know if fantastic is the right word. I'm gonna go ahead and crack the banjo bolts loose, drain the oil out of the cooler, and pull the lines. Now, I'm no hoseologist, but I think this might be bad. And if it wasn't before, it definitely is now. These oil cooler hoses haven't been an issue at all. There's been absolutely no leaks from them previously, but I guess moving things around during disassembly and reassembly might have added some stress to the lines where there otherwise hasn't been any in the past 40 years. Well, actually it's only been 36 years, but with the rubber being this old, it was only a matter of time before it's gonna fail. Better here on the bench where I can fix it right now than on the road and it leaves me stranded.
That is some thick metal right there. Good God.
The metal parts of the lines, however, are still perfectly fine, so I'm gonna try and save these. So this crimp is ruined. It is now garbage. But looking at the original hose, we can see that all it was really doing was just clamping on 2 different locations. And I have another thing that can clamp on in 2 different locations. 2 clamps. 9.5 centimeters exactly. Don't let me forget that. As long as I stagger the clamps rotationally, this should be a perfectly fine repair. And it's also kinda the only option since the only available replacements are also pushing for decades. And some of the ones that are available have already done exactly what I'm doing now. Well, it's not the only option, I guess. I could pay a professional to install brand new crimp connections, or spend lots of money on the tool to do it myself, but no. But with these on there good and tight, I can bolt this back up and torque everything down. And of course the other hose was also pulled off, repaired, and reinstalled. So now I just need to add back that oil I previously drained off, and we should be good to go ahead and start this thing up again.
That's right. Should probably give it some fuel.
And hey, no leaks. Awesome. That is awesome. But before I call this a complete win for the engine and be done with it, there's still one last thing I gotta do, and that's syncing up the carbs again. I already did a carburetor sync right after I fully rebuilt these, but that was before I did the valve adjustment last episode. When you alter the valve clearance, you're technically changing how far the valves actually open. It's a microscopic change, but it's enough to have an impact on the rate and volume of air going into each of the cylinders. Chances are it's not going to be too out of whack, but dialing them in only takes a couple minutes, so I'd be remiss if I didn't go ahead and do this. Well, with this thing back together and running like a top again, and not to mention the drivetrain and braking systems fully operable, the bike is done. Mechanically done, of course we all know it's garbage cosmetically, but even so, it's amazing. I know it definitely doesn't look it, but this right here is one whole year of work. The bike is done, and I'm finally gonna ride this thing. There is nothing that's gonna stop me. So yeah, that's definitely a big whoops. It actually has been 4 months. That title card was not an exaggeration. I finished it, then Elise and I very carefully brought it off the workbench, and then I forgot about it. Though, truth be told, and don't be mad, I actually did ride it that same day we got it off the workbench. I know that's old news for those of you that support me on Patreon, because I did share that first ride video back in February. But it honestly wasn't much of a first ride, because it was literally for less than 1 mile, and I also forgot to strap the GoPro on before I hopped on, so there wasn't really much to see anyways. But yeah, because of reasons, the bike sat. And because it sat, there's a few problems with it. How far did I bury you? The first problem is that I had to return the Sony A7R 4 I was borrowing, leaving me back with my crappier Canon T5i, so sorry about the reduced image quality. But as for things wrong with the bike, I noticed the front fairing subframe is missing the large bolt that holds it to the main frame. This thing was bouncing around while riding more than a beach ball at a Nickelback concert. Easy enough to fix though.
Oh yeah, it's on there now.
The second issue with the bike, the one that's actually due to it sitting for months, is a little bit bigger than a missing bolt.
Fuel just pouring out.
This leak right here is no doubt due to a stuck float needle. The float needle is what stops the flow of fuel from the supply line going into the carburetor bowl. It's the valve inside the carbs. There's no leak when the bike's not running because, like I've mentioned before, the petcock is vacuum actuated, but when the bike is running and the petcock's open, it's leak city. Usually you can get away with just softly tapping the carb with a light hammer or a screwdriver, just to send some vibrations through it to free things up.
That's the color of kidney failure.
But if that would have worked, it wouldn't have even been a footnote in this video, but here I am with an entire segment on the issue. See, the fuel that I added to both the auxiliary fuel tank that I used to run the bike, as well as the actual gas tank for the bike, were from jerry cans full of fuel that was a year old. Which already isn't great, but I made matters worse by letting that old fuel sit inside the carbs for 4 more months.
It's also pretty freaking dirty.
Yeah, that's not exactly what the professionals call smart. Luckily, that's not as bad as letting fuel sit in there for 17 years, so it more than likely won't be bad enough to where they need a full teardown like I originally gave them, but all of the floats and their respective valves are coming off, so I can flush out all of the passageways with aerosolized carburetor cleaner.
You can see the wires right there for going up and down. That's the hanger for the float valve. And this one just stuck. It is stuck in the open position. It's not going down. That is really stuck in there, good God.
And judging by how bad the gas looked and the gunk that was in the bottom of the bowls, these definitely needed to be gone through again, and not just for the stuck valve. They're dirty, but nowhere near as bad as last time where the ultrasonic cleaner all but had to be used. Carb cleaner in a can is more than enough here. Now if my ultrasonic cleaner was big enough to put the entire assembly in, I would have just done that, but it's not. I did go ahead and use my small one though to clean out the bowls while I was spraying the bodies down. They were only in there for about 10 minutes, but they cleaned right up, going from this to this. To get them ready to go back on, I cleaned off the mating surfaces and sprayed everything down again to remove what crud just came off. And just to be thorough, I gave the jets one more spray through. I noticed the brass parts in the carb with the stuck valve got really dark for some reason, so I cleaned that up too.
Shoot, now it looks better than this one.
Now it should just be a matter of reassembling everything, but I also noticed some of the floats didn't have the spring in their step nor the pip in their pep like they're supposed to. As you can see on this good float needle, the little end here is spring loaded to act as a little cushion for the tang that presses up against it. Not all of them were doing this. So after popping all of them back out and cleaning and lubricating them, they're now working exactly as they should. So now it's time to button everything back up for good.
I heard it go in there. It's not pouring out the side now, so.
Guys, this was the very last repair I had to do to this bike. I know I already said this in this episode one time, but I gotta do it again. The bike is done. Granted, I might have to do a bunch more work in the future if things go wrong, whether that's due to age or possibly the outright failure of something, but as a project, as a journey to get this thing back on the road where it has not been in nearly 2 decades, it's over. This is no longer a haven for hornets to build their nests in. It's no longer an oversized paperweight collecting dust in somebody's shed, and no longer a project on a table. It's finally just a motorcycle.
I gotta say, this thing rides absolutely wonderfully. It's just so smooth. There were a lot of comments saying that the pod filters were going to be an issue, that they were going to cause some issues mid-range, but I do have those aftermarket needles that kind of compensate for that. And the power delivery is just smooth on every single level as far as I can tell. To be 100% honest with you guys, I have not ridden a motorcycle in 3 years, so I'm not as confident as I used to be, especially when it comes to leaning and turning, just because it's been so long, and also this bike is just so big and so powerful. But it's great. It really is great. wondering why I'm sticking to just like a parking lot and the road going to the parking lot, that's because the bike still isn't registered. I don't know if I ever mentioned it in any of the videos, but there is no title for this bike. But I do have insurance for the bike, so it's not like I'm just riding it 100% carelessly. Let's see if I can do 0 to 60 in this tiny parking spot. All right. All right, that was too fast for my liking. That was too fast for my liking. Good God. See, that was just a 45 miles an hour, and that was fast. That was very fast. It's a good thing I'm wearing my diaper today.
I know this bike didn't result in some incredible before and after. I mean, it largely looks the exact same as the day I got it, just with a gray tank now. But it's far from that. And you guys know that. With 9 videos into this project, I have put an insane amount of work into this thing just to be able to ride it. It's been a year! A whole freaking year! Just to get it going. I know that scope creep is a very real thing, and also sometimes jobs just take longer than you originally anticipate them to. But when I started this project, I genuinely thought it was only going to be like a week of work and upload just a quick will it run style video. I did a little bit more than I originally thought I was going to. I mean, with all this time, the bike still isn't pretty. I know that. But honestly, I'm very happy with how it came out. I know a lot of you guys wanted me to paint it properly and do a full restoration on this thing, but that's not going to make it more fun for me to ride. It's not going to make it perform any better or be more reliable. I have so badly just wanted to be done with this bike for so long and enjoy it for what it is. And now, I can do that. I can just enjoy the bike. I just think that if I chose to spend any more time on this bike, I would have to absolutely hate myself. Where am I?